All right. Again, thank you all for taking the time to come out. We have two presentations today. One on the CDBG process, which is the City of Detroit process that deals with federal grants. And then also we have a youth committee that is going to present as well today. But we're going to go out of order and start with our youth committee first because our presenter for the CDBG process has not arrived. And so we're going to turn it over to Ari and Miss Amy.
Hello. So we also, for those of you who don't know, we also have a youth committee that it's changed names many times, but as of right now, I believe we're calling it the Committee for Youth Experiencing Homelessness because it is very broad. It deals more than just what people would consider traditionally homeless youth, also youth who are couch surfing or in other precarious housing situations. So we'd like to start each meeting with an update on what we're working on, and we're actually in the midst of a pretty large restructuring of our group. Just to give you a background, this group started as the youth committee actually started as a subcommittee of this task force, and it's being chaired by Amy Good with Alternatives for Girls, and then Jerry Peterson of the Ruth Ellis Center. And we've gotten a lot of cooperation, a lot of support, and a lot of active participation from nearly every youth service provider here in the city, and even sometimes outside of the city. So we've been going on for a few years, and we've had a lot of success, but we're actually in the midst of a pretty big restructuring, and we're going to go through that and kind of explain why, how that's looking, and what we expect to kind of achieve out of this restructuring. So I guess we'll get started.
Okay. So as I said, I'm Amy Good. I'm the Director of Alternatives for Girls. We're on the west side. We work with homeless and high-risk girls and young women, in case that's new to anybody. So as Ari said, we're just going to give you kind of an update about what's going on with our Committee on Youth Experiencing Homelessness. And am I doing something to cut this out?
This one. I might walk over here in case, I'm not sure.
It seems like it's cutting out.
Oh, the clicker's not working? Okay.
Is this working now? No.
Here, just take it.
A second ago. Oh, there.
Okay.
All right. People can let me know if it goes out and you can't hear. Okay, so as Ari said, we've been meeting for actually 3 years, a little over 3 years, and we came together in response to the impetus from this task force, asking Jerry Peterson from Ruth Ellis Center and me to spearhead this effort to just unify all of those serving youth experiencing homelessness and try to be more efficient in all ways, more efficient in sharing data and being on top of the strengths and weaknesses of our collaborative system, know each other better, get a handle on and analyzing our data and its implications for our work, etc. So we've been meeting for 3 years and really growing, and we've gotten some really great things done. We've really brought some money into the city, really supported by our collaboration, and also by the weight of the city council member and the city council and this group. So we've had a lot of success. We were growing to the point of becoming unwieldy. And initially it was a matter of, everybody who's serving youth experiencing homelessness, you all come. But we were growing and having more people come to each meeting, and sometimes there'd be a rather different group on one month than there was the month before, and we realized we really needed to put some structure into place, some decision-making structure. The only structure we really had was that Jerry and I were the co-chairs with Ari and your office in support. But it was time for some structure. We realized if we had to we did have to make a decision, several decisions. Do we want to go after this funding together? Do we want to prioritize this? And the decision-making process was just kind of whoever's there, just vote. There were, some of us agencies had 4 people at the table sometimes and 1 another time, and we decided we needed more structure, we needed more direction, we needed more clarity. And this, by the way, is a PowerPoint that was, in the spirit of full disclosure, this PowerPoint was not developed for today's meeting. It was developed for a meeting a few weeks ago, so you'll see a few things that might not be quite up to date. But because these are some of the reasons that we needed to restructure, we wanted clarity of roles. We wanted to be more aligned with the broader COC, continuum of care, and again, position ourselves in the very best way to be successful at bringing more money to our community to serve youth experiencing homelessness. As it says, to align with the COC governance charter with an approved membership, a clarity of a quorum and decision-making process, and also ensure that there are lots of different voices around the table with planned representation. So this is just an overview of who has been part of this, what we've called our reset process. So we decided back in January we need to step back and reset. It's a problem that grew out of our success, so it was a really good problem to have. So we convened a smaller group of those, and the larger group approved of this process. We convened a smaller group of those who had really been the most consistent, the most instrumental, and offering some leadership. So you can see on the left the list of those who came together in our small group that we called the reset process. And we did these things on the right. We looked at our purpose, we defined our values, we just talked about what a decision-making process would be going forward. We defined, this is probably the most important thing, we defined membership in the group going forward. And we came up with some definitions, and we did a lot of analysis of data that had been collected by various bodies, mostly the city and CSH and HAND and CAM. So
for those who don't know, the CSH is the what's it called? Center for Supportive Housing.
Supportive Housing, right. Thank you. And HAND being the Homeless Action Network of Detroit, and CAM being the Coordinated Assessment Model. It's the collective intake process. Most people who are serving people experiencing homelessness are familiar with CAM. It's just the coordinated intake that we're required to do because we receive HUD money. Any questions so far before we keep going? Okay. All right. Moving on. So we as I mentioned, we came up with some shared definitions of the role of the committee, and that first paragraph is according to the charter, that we are to make recommendations to the continuum of care, the COC board. I won't kind of read this overall, but we came up with our shared definitions of what the committee is, what a subset or a work group is, and where the support, the person power would come from to support our work. Okay, is that enough detail? You look like you've got a quizzical look on your face. Do you have a question? No? I'm looking at you. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. No, next to you.
Oh, no, I'm just having a hard time reading it.
Oh, okay.
That's all right.
All right. Feel free. I'll give you my copy when we're done. How about that? Okay. So moving on, just to give you a sense of the structure. So on the left is the COC board, Continuum of Care Board. And under that board, there are all these subgroups. There are a number of committees. Of course, the executive committee, LIHTC. Who remembers what that stands for?
Low-income housing tax
credits.
Low-income housing tax credits.
Low-income housing tax credits, right. Thank you. That committee as needed. The grievance committee, the values and funding priorities committee, and then another committee for new projects and one to handle appeals. There's the COC general membership, which is really the largest and the highest authority body. Of course, the board can makes decisions in between those means of general membership. And then there are the special population committees, and the youth committee is one among them. Also the veterans committee and a committee on those experiencing chronic homelessness. And then there are these additional committees. Actually, to clarify, on the left column, it's board committees. So those are subsets of the board. And then the green column is COC committees overall. And then on the right column, there are work groups of different providers. The outreach work group, the shelter work group, the rapid rehousing work group, the transitional housing work group, and the permanent supportive housing work group. So that's the structure of the COC, and that's where our youth committee fits in. Okay? So we came up with a lot of discussion, really, our purpose and our core values. So we decided, probably most of you can read that, but in case you can't, that our purpose is to lead, not be, but lead a responsive system of care in Detroit to meet the needs of youth experiencing homelessness. And we talked a lot about, do we want to say we're going to end youth homelessness, period? We decided no. Our purpose is to make youth homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. That we wanted to have a realistic but ambitious purpose, and that's what we settled on as our purpose. And we identified these core values, just that that housing first, that model and theory of housing first and harm reduction would be part of our values. Trauma informed, that all of our work and all of those who participate in our work, all those agencies would have a trauma-informed approach. Positive youth development, it's, we look at youth, the assets that youth bring to the table and not deficits. Equity, inclusion, and cultural competency, we want to be more data-driven. We've been data-driven, we want to be more data-driven, and we want to share responsibility for outcomes. Not just look at our outputs or our processes, but really look at outcomes and hold ourselves accountable and be transparent around the outcomes that we're achieving. And then dignity, hope, and resilience. Okay, questions? All right. So the bottom line of what we came up with is we want broad participation. We want youth to have a strong and clear voice at the table. But we also want a smaller group that's manageable and that is consistent enough to make decisions. So we came up with that there is a youth committee. There is a committee on youth homelessness with a defined membership, and then there are work groups, subgroups to that committee. And we would define the membership of the committee on the basis of organization representation. So there's a limited number of people. Not every agency serving homeless youth or serving youth experiencing homelessness would be present at every meeting. We'd have a defined membership. We'd have elections for a stated period of time. Those folks would represent all the others providing services to youth, and we can be consistent and have the continuity from meeting to meeting. So we set forth some expectations of all those who would be members of the committee going forward. I won't read them all, but kind of the obvious things: be active, be consistent, take ownership, understand, do your homework and understand the data. Okay. Ari, could you just skip forward for a sec and then come back to this one?
Sure.
So as I said, this is our basic structure. There's the COC board. We are we wear two hats. We're a subcommittee of this group, and we're also a committee of the COC board, our Committee on Youth Homelessness, and two subgroups to our committee. One is the Youth Homelessness System of Care Partners Work Group. So everybody who serves youth experiencing homelessness is invited and encouraged to participate in that group. That group is large, doesn't have the restrictions of limited membership, the requirement for continuity or consistency. That is, everybody who serves this population is welcome to come together. And then on the left, the Youth Action Board, the board of youth who have experienced homelessness. They'll have a voice collectively and also a seat at the table of the youth committee. So now if you can go backwards for a second. So this is our proposed committee membership. We've brought this to the larger group and gotten feedback. We have yet to get it fully ratified by the larger group and by the COC board, but this is where we are. And because I know not everybody can see, I'll just kind of tell you who's there. So elected positions would be those in the orange, and that would be the Youth Action Board representatives, the COC board member, and 2 or 3 providers, direct service providers who serve youth experiencing homelessness. So those would be the roles would be elected. Appointed, or kind of, that are already set, are Michigan Department of Health and Human Services representative, the COC lead agency, CAM, the CAM lead agency representative, the McKinney-Vento liaison, a public funder, and a private funder. And then others that are non-voting are committee staff and technical assistance providers or resource people as needed.
We could probably skip over the last part.
Pardon me?
We could probably skip over those last parts.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, in terms of timeline, the timeline that's in here is a little outdated,
Yeah.
But we will be presenting this to the larger COC in the June meeting, which is the first Monday of June, whatever that date is, and rolling it out in the following months. Probably, we talked about a full rollout in August. And I think, yeah,
that's it.
I think that's good. What did I leave out, Ari?
Nothing really. Did anyone have any questions? This is still very much a work in progress, but we're continuing to meet to kind of figure out what works best and what would be the best way to get more of a youth voice. So we're also establishing a youth advisory council, or actually youth action council, which will be another board made up strictly of youth who have experienced homelessness, and they will have a direct voting and a direct participatory action in what we do, and hopefully will go up also to the greater COC board so that they actually have a real voice in what's going on in youth homelessness services. And another reason, one of the reasons why we're also doing this restructuring is we have applied for and actually received some grants in the past, including one that Alternatives for Girls received last year for rapid rehousing for youth experiencing homelessness. But we want to be more competitive when it comes to applying for some of these federal grants, specifically a youth homeless demonstration program, project grant that's due pretty soon. So we think if we have a much more structured approach, we'll be much more competitive for getting these federal and state and different grants. So did anyone have any questions? Oh.
I just wanted to ask a question. When you say youth homelessness, what age groups are you talking about?
Thank you for that question, because we didn't say that. 24 and under. And we don't have a bottom line because we don't want to rule out sometimes even young youth, under. Alternatives for Girls serves and houses those 15 to 21. But sometimes there are homeless youth who need help from our system, even if they're younger than 15. They'll eventually need to get into the foster care system or something like that if they're under 15, but sometimes they might land with us first, and so we're not ruling out any, lower end of that system. But for the most part, 15 to 24.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a copy of that? Sure.
Do you have any ways and means that you get involved with their family to? Oh. Do you do something like that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
To kind of reconnect them.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't talk a lot about the direct services that are happening because we just talked today about our system and our coming together of all those providing direct services. But yes, Alternatives for Girls and all of those who provide direct services to youth experiencing homelessness. That's one of the very first things that we look to is, many of them do have families who are able and willing to safely provide them support, their immediate family or extended family or beyond, and they're so much better off if they can connect with family members. And so that's the first thing we look at, and we do everything we can to support that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So again, and I know a lot of people here do a lot of outreach in the communities, and so if they encounter individuals that are youth 24 and under, should they directly call CAM first, and just kind of maybe direct people who do encounter individuals who are 24 and under who are experiencing homelessness? Can you direct them to the appropriate way in which they can connect them with housing?
Exactly. The first call should be to CAM. If it's
the number too.
Pardon me?
The number.
The number.
Oh, they took away the number, right?
I don't have it memorized. Who has the CAM number? I have it in my phone. I can dig it up in a second.
Well, now we have intake centers.
But
Yeah.
you can call. You can.
There still has to be a
call the number
that individuals can call to
Yeah.
get the areas where the intake centers are.
Yeah, there's a number.
We'll make sure we get that number to individuals that are here, those who are going to be watching on television as well too, that they know that they can call
Yes.
the CAM and direct them to the intake centers.
I can dig it up in a minute, actually. I'll
Okay.
hand it to you. And can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about a lot is there's a really limited number. There are 4 agencies in Detroit that specifically
Right.
address youth experiencing homelessness. Do you have the number? Okay, just one second. But most of those agencies that serve homeless people also serve those within that age range, 24 and under. So those of us who exist for the purpose to focus on homeless youth are not the only ones serving homeless people in this age range. So we encourage all to get involved, and we'll be doing outreach to those serving the broader homeless population that includes those who are homeless and 24 or under. So we encourage broad participation, and we'll keep you posted. So the phone number, 313-305-0311. 0311.
And I know from experience, I've called them before, and they're extremely helpful when you call, and they can direct you to the right place.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all for the report. Let's give a round of applause to our youth subcommittee. They have done a wonderful job. And when we first started this task force, we were not sure what we really wanted to focus on. And we reached out to several service providers and asked them where were the gaps in some of the services. And youth kept coming up. And you all really have taken the lead. And so we appreciate the hard work that you all do. So if you guys have any additional questions, I would encourage you all to reach out to the youth subcommittee. All right, next we're going to turn it over to Meghan Takashima. She is a representative from the mayor's office to give us an update on the CDBG process in the city of Detroit.
Good afternoon, everyone. First off, thank you, Council President Pro Tem Sheffield, for allowing us to present here. I am Meghan Takashima. I'm with the Housing and Revitalization Department, and I oversee the homeless programs and the award of homeless funding that comes to the city from the Housing and Urban Development Department. This is Tara Linsner. She's also on the team. And I just wanted to understand who's in the room right now. By show of hands, how many of you are service providers to people experiencing homelessness? How many of you may be people experiencing homelessness yourself? Okay. And then what about just interested parties, people who are just interested in the topic? Okay. Is there anyone I missed?
Outreach.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Well, thanks. And so I'm going to try to tailor this presentation to the folks that are in the room. Some of you, this may be a little bit more detailed than you ever wanted to know. But so the City of Detroit will be releasing what we're calling the Homelessness Solutions RFP, and we'll be releasing that on May 20th, 2019. And so this is an opportunity just to orient you to that process in case there's an interest from any of you in applying for funds. So Tara and I work on the Homelessness Solutions team, and we have some key priorities for the City of Detroit to improve services to people experiencing homelessness. First off, we want to improve the quality of services that are provided to people experiencing homelessness. And so the focus here is really to make sure that the programs are reaching the people in most need. And we'll talk a little bit about the different details of the types of programs that are available to apply for. And we also want to help people regain stability quickly in permanent housing after experiencing a housing crisis. So as much as possible, we don't want people to be homeless for a long length of time. If they experience homelessness, then we want them to be able to quickly access housing and be on their way. Additionally, we want to enhance the alignment of the funds that we have for homelessness with other funds that are available through various sources, many of them through the continuum of care process, but also there are housing choice vouchers and different programs across the city. So as much as possible, we want to be in alignment on how we're spending those funds. And then a new focus for this year is to support more coordinated and effective data collection. And this includes performance measurement and program evaluation. So for those of you who are funded by the City of Detroit or the Continuum of Care, you're well aware of the Homeless Management Information System. This is a system whereby everyone who experiences homelessness is tracked in order to see how they're moving through the system and ensure that providers who are providing different types of care can see what resources people are receiving, what additional resources they need. And that system provides a wealth of information to help us understand how people are being served, how long people are experiencing homelessness, how many people are entering the system new, different details like that. And so, for those of you who are subrecipients or potentially interested in becoming subrecipients of these funds, there's a couple things we want you to focus on. First, we want to focus on program quality and outcomes as opposed to outputs. So in the past, we may ask you, how many shelter bed nights did you provide? And while shelter is an essential service, we also want to think about, did those shelter bed nights help people get access to other resources and get housed? Because if one person is receiving, for example, 700 shelter bed nights, I don't necessarily see that as a success, because that means that that person has been homeless for over 2 years. So we're really looking to see that people are moving through the system as quickly as possible. And we also want to track performance benchmarks for each type of program. So the City of Detroit funds 4 core programs that subrecipients could apply for: shelter, outreach, prevention, and rapid rehousing. And so we will talk through each of those. And then the last thing is, the City of Detroit has really done a great job in cleaning up its financial records and ensuring that we are a good recipient of federal funds. So for our subrecipients, we're also very focused on ensuring that subrecipients are spending their money in a timely fashion, because that's ensuring that the money is getting out the door to the people who have the need for services. So, with that in mind, I'm going to talk you through the request for proposal that will be released on May 20th. For those of you who have been subrecipients of the city before, you're probably aware that we used to run 2 different processes, one for the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG funds, and one for the Emergency Solutions Grant funds. So, for subrecipients, this was a headache and kind of a pain because you had a ton of different contracts floating around. So we recognized that there was a significant amount of efficiency to be gained by combining those 2 contract streams into one contract and also doing one RFP process. So in this coming year, we'll be doing one RFP process, and we will award approximately $4.6 million in resources to support the different programs types that I mentioned. And so we will walk through what those are and what they look like now. And I will say, if people have questions, there's a lot of information here, so if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We can answer them as we go. And if you have worked with the city before, you know that generally if you're submitting an application to provide services or receive a city grant, that you need to apply through the BidSync system. So we're anticipating that this RFP will be available in BidSync on May 20th, 2019. Every organization that applies will apply once, regardless of the number of programs they're applying for, and the RFP must be submitted by 4 p.m. on June 24th. So you'll have about a month to respond to the application. I will say we're hopeful that a month will provide enough time, but we also are going to be providing 2 workshops for those who are interested in applying, and those will walk through the details of the application process and probably some of the information you're receiving now. So for those of you who will be going to that, I apologize because some of the information may be duplicative. And if you have questions as you're filling out the application, questions can be submitted through the BidSync system. Generally, we don't have conversations with subrecipients during that time because we don't want to give anyone an unfair advantage. So questions are fielded through the BidSync and through our procurement department. We answer the questions and send them back. So it seems a little informal, but it's a way to ensure fairness in the assessment of the application. And those questions are submitted via BidSync. So one of the things I just wanted to talk through is the threshold criteria for application. If you are a new grantee, this is something to understand because it may help you determine if this application makes sense for you or not. Some of these threshold criteria come directly from HUD requirements, and some of them are created by the city. So in order to qualify to apply for grant funds, you would need to demonstrate at least one person who has experienced homelessness is represented on your board, or that you will comply with that if you're receiving funds. You need to provide a board of directors meeting schedule for the 2019 program year. We want to make sure that your board is active and involved in the work that you're doing. We need you to provide proof of capacity to pay for expenses up front, and there are some intricacies to that, but as a general rule, we're not going to pay you until you submit your reimbursement package, so you have to be able to do the startup that's necessary in order to apply for a grant. You also need to be a nonprofit organization, so have your articles of incorporation, and at least 2 years experience serving serving vulnerable populations with public funding. So it's okay if you haven't applied for and received homeless dollars before, but that you have received some sort of public funding to serve people in need. And I see a question over here. So I did not print it, so I was hoping Ari could send it out to the group afterwards. I'm certainly happy to pass it along.
Sure, I can actually send both PowerPoints.
Great. So those are the threshold criteria. One other thing to be aware of is expectation of match. So we have a grant called the Emergency Solutions Grant. That grant from HUD requires that we do 100% match, and so that's where we use our Community Development Block Grant to kind of build out that amount of money available. There is the potential that a grantee may be asked to provide some additional match if, for example, we want to provide services outside of the requirements of the ESG program, because ESG has some kind of strict requirements regarding how people can be served with their income, their homelessness status, things like that. So in order for us to be able to make grants that we think will be helpful, some grantees may be required to put some match up front. So that will be asked in the contract. For 2019, a few things that are new. First off, that subgrantees will receive one contract for both their grant streams, so hopefully trying to remember your contract number and the different details related to that will become simpler. The street outreach component, which it sounds like a lot of you are doing street outreach, will move to a change, kind of like a distinction between those two components. One will be called outreach, which is more like what you traditionally know as outreach services. The other will be housing navigation, which is helping people get the documents they need in order to obtain permanent housing. And we will be starting the process of creating performance-based contracts. And this is a 3-year implementation term. So year one is kind of establishing baseline of performance. Over the course of time, we'll be creating performance expectations for organizations in order to continue to receive the same funding amount or receive additional funding. So we really are putting the emphasis on the performance of the organization. We'll talk a little bit about what those performance measures are. So these are the components that we talked about. There are essentially 4 eligible components for the work that we fund, and we'll talk through these in some level of detail. The first is outreach and housing navigation, and essentially that is funded through what's called outreach. The second is emergency shelter. Many of you know what emergency shelter is. It's, overnight stay for people experiencing homelessness that have nowhere to go. The third program type is something called rapid rehousing. And rapid rehousing is a permanent housing program where people receive up to, in this case, a year of rental assistance in order to obtain stability. And at that point, your case management and rental assistance services go away, and people move on to self-sufficiency on their own. And the last program type is something called prevention, which is helping people avoid eviction, avoid homelessness. So these are funds that are put out in order to help people, for example, if they're facing eviction and they need funds to stay in their home, to pay their rent to stay there, or potentially to relocate because they're not able to make arrangements with their landlord. So those are the things that we'll be funding with these dollars. And I'm going to talk through the eligible components. I don't want to go over it in too much detail because I don't know how relevant it is to all of you, but want to at least get you up to speed in case you have any questions. So looking at the outreach and housing navigation, there are 2 separate components that groups can apply for. These are street outreach and navigation, and agencies can apply for one of those components or they can apply for both. They have the option of doing either. But each service component has different expectations. So for street outreach, the target population is unsheltered homeless individuals living in places not meant for human habitation. So people sleeping on the street, sleeping in encampments, locations like that. And what we want to see is the ability to develop relationships with unsheltered individuals to connect them to resources. So this is really like the most essential work, getting people who are on the streets, off the streets, into safer locations while they work towards housing. In addition, we're expecting that a lot of this work occurs after business hours. So this isn't necessarily an 8 to 5 program because that's not generally where you're going to find people under bridges. So we want to see that some work is being done after hours in the nighttime so that people are being reached. In addition, these folks must participate in Code Blue responses, and what does that mean? So Code Blue, over the course of this last winter, do you remember what did they call it, the Arctic polar vortex? Do you remember the polar vortex? So during the polar vortex this last year, we had to ask our outreach teams to work extra hours, to put in extra time to make sure everyone was reached because there was so much danger of sleeping on the street. And so being able to draw on this group of people that are funded to do outreach in situations that are emergency situations like that is really essential to keeping people safe. And then the other piece of this is navigation. And this population is the same population as unsheltered individuals, but the goal of navigation is to help people get document ready. So the majority of the housing programs that people are trying to get into are HUD funded, and generally they need at least at minimum an ID and proof of income in order to get into those programs. And so it is an essential service to help people get qualification for a program. So doing that work is kind of the second component we'll be considering for outreach. And the eligible activities here are engagement, case management, and transportation. And document ready means that people have everything they need in order to get access to housing. How am I doing, Tara? Did I forget anything? So looking at the performance measures for navigation, 100% of clients will meet the definition of unsheltered. So these services are to be provided on the street, not in a shelter or another location. People will become document ready, and also looking at the percentage of people who exit to a permanent housing destination, because obviously that's the goal, that people have permanent housing. And then, go ahead. Okay. And so the street outreach goals, I might have to go back. Okay. Uh-oh, they're not here. Oh, okay. The goals for... Okay, the goals for street outreach is, again, that 100% of the clients served are unsheltered. Looking at the percentage of clients who complete all the required assessments that are going to get them access to housing, and the percentage of clients who exit to a sheltered destination. So we want to see people who are under bridges, even if it's just for the short term, getting to shelter and places that can get them access to resources. So those are...
Actually, Megan, I have a quick question. When you say 100% of clients will meet the definition of unsheltered, that means that you can't have people who are in shelters during the day. I'm sorry, in shelters in the evening and then outside during the day?
That would be okay. I mean, so this is a HUD regulatory requirement, is that everyone is unsheltered in this program, and so then we started to dig through the data in that Hmis system and learned that not 100% of the people that were being served were unsheltered, and so that was a little concerning to us. So now we're kind of reasserting that the expectation that's coming from HUD is that people that you're serving through an outreach program are homeless. So if they're in a shelter or a warming center during the day, but they're sleeping outside, they would still qualify for. Okay, so I'm gonna jump to the emergency shelter and warming centers and talk a little bit about that. So emergency shelters and warming centers. Target population here are people experiencing homelessness who need somewhere to go. This can include homeless families, single men and women, and the youth population. And one thing we really want to drill down on is the fact that families must be served regardless of their composition. This may be hard to believe, but we still have shelters that are turning away families where there's a male head of household because they say that they serve women and children, which may have been their service model in the past, but unfortunately for them, and fortunately for those folks, they need access to shelter too. So regardless of the way a family presents, the expectation from HUD and the City of Detroit is that you're going to welcome them into your shelter. And the goal of shelter is to provide a safe place for people to stay while they're working to get access to other resources. There's 2 eligible activities here. We've got case management and operations of the shelter. And then secondarily, some of you may be aware that the city operates warming centers, and those warming centers generally start in November of the year and close in March. And the goal of the warming centers is really that there tends to be more demand for shelter during those cold months, so making sure that we have adequate shelter available, we open additional beds. And we find that generally there's not a demand for those beds in the summer months, so it doesn't make sense to continue to pay for that service. And in the past, we've operated 2 family warming centers and 1 single male warming center. So, we're expecting that we'll need to do the same in the coming year. And these services are available to people who are homeless, and that includes a whole number of categories related to homelessness that HUD requires us to note here. And so these are people that are literally homeless on the street. These are people at risk of homelessness. I'm going to skip that one. And then people fleeing domestic violence who need a place to stay. And so thinking about emergency shelter, there are some specific performance measures we're asking to see. The first one is shelter utilization. So if you're operating a shelter, we want to see that it's full. And the reason we're concerned about that is because we don't want to pay for empty beds. And we know that the demand is out there. So ensuring that the shelter utilization is at a high rate, ideally over 90%, is what we're looking for over the course of the year. Second, we're looking at the percentage of exits to a permanent housing destination. Shelters have a role in helping people access housing, particularly when people come into the shelter and have access to some sort of income. Helping them navigate the resources they need to move out on their own is a really essential part of the service that should be provided. And then we want to see that client charts demonstrate a housing plan within 14 days of entry. So because the goal of the shelter is to get someone housed, the first move should be to talk to them about how they're going to get housing. So creating a plan to move forward with that. And these measures ring true for the single and family warming centers as well. And so we talked a little bit about warming center. I think we can skip this, but generally the warming center are those seasonal shelters. Just to note, there are a few things that are ineligible. They're on this list, and you guys can review them if you have questions. I'm not going to go through each of these, but these are the things that HUD specifically says we can't pay for with their money. So the next category we're going to talk about is rapid rehousing. And this may be the one that is harder for people to wrap their head around because it's a newer program. So people experiencing homelessness on the streets or the shelter or in shelter qualify for rapid rehousing. They have to score for rapid rehousing on the VI SPDAT. Have any of you heard of the VI SPDAT? Okay, so for those of you who haven't, it's an assessment tool that assigns a numeric score to a household based on their vulnerability. The higher the score, the higher the vulnerability. And so different services are assigned on the basis of that score. And there is a large group of people that generally are scoring for rapid rehousing when they take that assessment. And so these are the folks that are getting referred to the rapid rehousing program. And what we want to see is that people are moving through the system as quickly as possible. So if they're referred to rapid rehousing, they're following up with the provider's reaching out to them as quickly as possible, they're helping them to find housing as quickly as possible, and they're moving them to self-sufficiency as quickly as possible, and using all the resources that are available to do that. And so the eligible activities are rental assistance and housing relocation and stabilization services. And so one thing that's new this year is we're reducing the length of time that people can stay in the program, because one thing we're seeing is fewer people are getting access to resources and they're staying for a long time, which means a lot of people are just sitting in shelter who need those resources. So we're trying to move people through the system more quickly. I think we can skip this piece. Okay, so performance measures for rapid rehousing. Again, these are the things we're looking at in order to judge the quality of the program. We want to look at the average length of time from program entry to house. So if people are referred to a rapid rehousing program, they're getting into housing quickly. They're not sitting in shelter because they can't find a place to live. They're getting the help to do that. We want to see that clients are receiving case management services at least every 30 days. And the goal of that is that people are getting case management services, they're getting access to the help that they need to quickly move on. And that they're getting home visits at least every 90 days, because really when you think about what's happening with someone, it's a lot easier to see what's happening when you go to their home rather than talking to them on the phone. We're also looking at the percentage of clients that exit to permanent housing destinations. So obviously, when you leave the program, you want to leave on positive terms that you're still housed, and the percentage of clients that are exiting quickly, so within 180 days. Last category, thanks for bearing with me, is prevention. And so the target population here are people who are at risk of homelessness. And the other key thing is that they are low income, below 30% of the area median income. And so those numbers are on HUD's website if you want to see what they are, but essentially these are folks that don't have a lot of money. The goal here is that you're giving light touch assistance to help people regain their stability in their current permanent housing, or if it's not able to kind of manage the situation in their current housing, then to move them quickly so that they can get housing elsewhere. The eligible activities are rental assistance and housing relocation and stabilization services. We generally want to see that this program is serving people for no more than 3 months, because we want to serve a lot of people through prevention. And that's because there's not a lot of money in our community for prevention, and there's a lot of need. I think the number I heard is that there's over 30,000 evictions in 36 district court every year, and so that's an astounding number of people that need help with housing in order to stay housed. And so just another thing is that people need proof of their eviction, so generally they have to bring some documentation with them. They can't just say, I'm in a fight with my landlord, he doesn't like me. They have to show that they're at risk of that. And then when we talk about performance measures for prevention, we want to see people in the program for a short length of time, ideally 3 months or less. That the percentage of clients who exit are going to a permanent housing destination, and we want to see that the prevention efforts are successful. So we use the HMIS system to go back in and see, okay, if you were served a year ago, did you enter the homelessness system, or did the resources that you were given help you stay housed? And really that's the goal here, is that you don't have to enter the system of care, because the homelessness system is not a good place to be. The thing that I tell people all the time is that the highest risk indicator for being homeless as an adult is being homeless as a child. So whatever we can do to avoid entry into that system is really essential. Okay, so I'm going to skip this last slide about ineligible activities. You can review those if you're interested, and ask if there are any questions before I wrap up.
She had her hand up first. Ari, behind you. Ari, she had her hand up first. Well, it doesn't matter.
We can work our way across.
Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Okay,
However, as long as you see both.
Will a list of the programs that have received funding under this RFP contract be posted publicly anywhere? Because how do you find your homeless neighbors access to case management and services and transportation to these programs is damn near impossible.
Okay. I'm trying to think if these resources are posted anywhere. They could be on the COC's website. I have to dig around and see if that's the case. If not, it is pretty easy for us to release the awards from the prior year so that you're aware of what those organizations are.
And also, we can commit to sending out, because as Megan mentioned, we do approve the CDBG process funding, and so we can commit to sending that out every year during the budget process to you all, that you all can spread to your different organizations as well. So we can do that as well.
Okay, my question is, with the focus more on gathering more data in the system and the HMIS, is there a plan in place now where data is going to be looked at to look at some of those recidivisms back into homelessness? Because myself doing this for 5 years, outreach, case management, shelter work, emergency shelter, emergency programs, that's one of the biggest things that I see, even working in the veterans program. Each veteran has so much money allotted to them per like year and a half, almost 2 years. And then we're seeing that recidivism coming in just like we do in the prison system. And I'm interested to know if there's like a plan in place to address that.
Okay.
You know?
Well, yeah, so a couple things. I will say that the interest is not in increasing the amount of data collected. You'd be surprised to know that we're already collecting all of this data. I think the question is, are we using it to ensure that we're getting quality services? And so from a federal level, HUD does look at communities' returns to homelessness, but that's like a total community number. And so what we're focusing on is trying to understand specific numbers by specific organizations so that we have a good sense of what the quality of the programs are. For the city specifically, you know, the programs we're funding are the prevention and the rapid rehousing. Those are the key permanent housing programs, but then there's a significant amount of money that goes into supportive housing through the continuum of care. So this is definitely on the radar, and we are aware that our returns look high compared to the national average, so we are trying to dig in and understand why that is and what we can put in place to reduce that number.
Hi, yes, my name is Kathy Buford, and I was in one shelter for 90 days. Now I'm in another shelter for 90 more days. I got both my combination numbers for Section 8, and I don't know what to do. They ain't got in contact with me, send me no mail through the mail or nothing to tell me what to do. But Cam told me that I was approved for rapid housing and permanent housing, but I haven't heard nothing from nobody.
Well, so I think we can take down your information following the meeting, and we'll get an answer to you on what's going on.
In all the places I put the applications in, senior citizen department, they keep calling me, asking me have I received my paperwork.
Okay, we'll try to help you navigate that so we can figure out how to get you to housing.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say CDBG and ESG or just CDBG?
I said CDBG and ESG.
Yep,
Any other questions?
Go ahead, if you have a question.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
By the grace of God, I'm blessed. Now, I was just wondering, I was talking to this beautiful woman right here. I was wondering, like, I've been staying in this house for like about 10 years, and the guy that's claimed he bought it, he from Argentina, but he stay in Vegas. And it's so much work that you got to put in the house, so...
Do you have a lease in that house, or have you had a lease?
No, somebody told me that all you got to do is just have mailing address to come there.
Okay.
But it's so much work that got to be done to the house.
And you're paying rent every month?
Nah, I don't pay no rent because there ain't no electricity or no water in there.
Okay. So do you want to be there, or are you trying to be somewhere else?
I mean, the house is beautiful. All you got to do, my homeboy, he's a plumber. He's a master plumber. He got his own business. He told me he could cook the water up. But I heard that nobody owned the house.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's dangerous for you to put money into a house that you don't own and you don't know who owns it, because you may not, be able to stay there for the long term.
He told me, like, put $1,000 or $500, though, because some people came in, they tried to come in the house and throw stuff out, but they didn't actually own it.
Okay, well, can we talk to you offline about this and see what we can do to help?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Great.
rapid rehousing because I'm living with a relative, and I think it's going on too long. It's like there are so many layers. When we got there, she said you could stay there until your son graduate. For some reason, I think people get tired of you, and I think it's becoming stressful to my son and I, because we do not disrespect her house. It's just that, but people take her side. They say it's her house. She can talk to you any kind of way. But I was trying to save up money, and then when the Department of Human Service told me that you're making too much money, but it was really one check, and I was asking the banker, could she open up a little account and let me put money aside for savings so that we can get out. So then the Department of Human Service said that I think they said you have too much money, but it was really one money going in two different directions. So I'm having a hard time because we really need to get out.
Okay, we can talk about the potentials to help with the first month's rent or security deposit to get you access to your own housing.
So also there is income-based housing. So if you go onto like MSHA's website, if you type in like MSHDA, if you go to MSHA's website, you can look for housing that's called like project-based voucher housing. And so you can see the different kind of project-based voucher programs that are available in the city of Detroit or whatever other areas that you're interested in going to. Yep, sorry. You can do those, so then you can see like what kind of housing is based on your income, and you can call them and see if they have open availability and if they have a wait list, and get more information to see if you would qualify for that kind of housing. So maybe I'll talk to you after because I'm yeah, so.
We can follow up.
All right. Any other questions for Megan?
Great. Thank you all for your time. We'll make sure we get that RFP out to you, or this application.
One more question, Megan, before you leave.
Do you have dates for the workshops yet?
Yes. Tara, do you remember the dates?
So the dates will be May 21st from 9 to 12, and then May 22nd from 1:30 to 4:30, and both of those will be at Focus Hope.
And again, I'll send out the both PowerPoints, and if there's any like follow-up information that you want, I can send that out to everyone as well.
Thank you, Megan. All right, so really quick, just wanted to report out to you all a couple things, and then we're going to open it up to just a discussion, questions, concerns that you all have, and if you all have any maybe direction that you think the task force should go in the coming months. So the first thing I wanted to report out, some of you all may or may not know that I authored the ordinance, which is an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires 20% of all new developments set aside 20% affordable housing in new developments. A part of that ordinance also created a housing trust fund. And thanks to the DAC, I see some people here today, several other organizations came down. You all fought really hard with me along with Counsel to try to get $10 million allocated to that fund. Unfortunately, we were not able to get that much, but we did get an additional $2 million added to the fund, which takes us to about $3.6 million set aside for an affordable housing fund. The difference between this fund and other housing funds, and why I'm really excited about it, is that it really focuses on our most vulnerable citizens in the city of Detroit. So it houses individuals at 50% AMI and below, and I think roughly for a one-person family or a one-person household, that's around $23,000 and under. Is that right? About 50% AMI?
No, it's a little more. It's about 25,000.
25. Okay, so 25,000 and below. And then also we go as deep as 30% AMI as well too. And so that housing trust fund, again, has about $3.6 million in it. We are still actively fighting for additional funding for that. And in fact, a part of the FCA deal, which is the Fiat Chrysler deal that's coming to the city of Detroit, the city is going to be selling one of its garages. And a part of that sale, we get 20% of the proceeds of that garage, which takes us up to about another $3 million. Is that correct, or is it more than that? Can't remember the amount.
Actually looked at
we
the
haven't got the
numbers
amount, but I heard today it was roughly another $3 to $4 million that may come into that pot. So we're getting up to that $10 million, which is very, very important, because when we talk about homelessness in the city of Detroit, I truly believe that this fund is going to help house individuals and provide quality, affordable housing for individuals that are really, really low income. So I wanted to mention that, and also thank the DAC and other organizations that came down to advocate for that. I also wanted to mention the right to counsel ordinance that my office is working on alongside the UCHC. And so we're trying to provide free legal counseling for individuals and families that are facing eviction in the 36th District Court. And so right now, there's a situation where there's several families that are being evicted. They do not have the means in which to get legal counsel. And so we're trying to provide, like other cities do, free legal counseling for families and individuals that are facing eviction in the city of Detroit. We have an ordinance that is drafted right now. Now we're just looking at ways to actually fund that. And so I just wanted to mention that to you all as well. Lastly, the Occupy the Corner event. This is our signature event that we do every single year. It's the biggest event that my office puts on. Last year we had recording artist Big Sean. I'm not sure if some of you all know Big Sean. A lot of the kids love him. But this is our way that we engage with the community. We go door to door. We provide resources from minor felony expungement to utility assistance to mental health services, homeless services. And so wanted you all to save the date, which is June the 21st. We have not identified a location yet, but just save the date for June the 21st. It will be our sixth annual, sixth annual Occupy the Corner event. And we would love to have all of you all out and engage with the residents in the city of Detroit. And we always try to go to an inner city community or neighborhood that we believe is underserved, underrepresented, and is in need of resources. And so I just want to make sure you all knew about that. And shout out to Brother Joe back there, Outcry Ministries, who every year provides food and resources to us. And so looking forward to that event. And I think that was it for me. We're going to now open it up to questions, events, concerns, anything that you all would like to discuss before we wrap up the meeting today. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm coming. Sorry.
Hi. So I've never been homeless and I've never provided homeless services, but I happen to befriend a local homeless neighbor. And one of the challenges that I found, even as an educated, employed, housed individual, I could not find how to navigate the homeless system. How do I find access to case management services? How do I navigate? How do I get there? How do I give people directions there? If you can't get access to a computer or a phone, how do you apply for an identity card? How do you get into the HMIS system, which is required to be tracked through the system? And there's no single resource, at least that I could find, that tells me, here's how you get into the HMIS system. Here's how you get connected to a case management service, or here's all of the places you can go. I just found out there's an intake center at 1600 Porter, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Mm-hmm. My friend Gregory doesn't know that, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Gail might know that, but did you? Nope. Nobody knows it. There are these walk-in places that those who don't have access to internet, computers,
right.
phone numbers, how are we planning on getting in front of the people who need it to give them the information to connect them to these resources that the CDBG and ESG funds are going to go for?
Right, and I think that's a great question. I don't know if there's anyone here from HAND, or I'm not sure if Megan, if you want to try to tackle it, but I know when they transitioned from it being a phone online intake from the phone to intake centers, physical intake centers, we talked about the importance of outreach, and they mentioned doing, media services, commercials, doing some internet promotions, things of that sort. So I'm not sure if you guys want to talk a little bit more about outreach and what you've done thus far, making sure that it's in existing shelters and service providers, but I think that's very important to make sure people understand that it's not a phone intake any process anymore. It's now a physical intake centers and where those particular locations are.
So the website for CAM is camdetroit.org, or there's a phone number. Phone number is 313-305-0311. The other thing, in Detroit generally, you can call 211, and 211 will give you information about just about any resource, not specifically to housing, but food, different things that you may need. So those would be what I would recommend as the starting point. And, if you call that number, you'll get the different details about where people should go to seek additional assistance.
Oh, and just let me add, and while it's not exactly what you asked in terms of like an ideal kind of clearinghouse for that, you can always call our office at 313-224-4505. We do get a lot of calls, and we work very well with the administration and with HAND and with all the other organizations. So if like I said, if all else fails, feel free to call our office. I saw that lady back there first. Yes.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Cherry, and I was just trying to assist the young lady who was standing up with the blue shirt. I'm currently homeless, and I've never been in this situation. So it was due to domestic violence. So when I finally ran out, I just ran to the police department, and they had a listing of all the numbers and all the resources that I could use. And they also called CAM for me and they drove me over to CAM on Porter. So I didn't know about the service as well, but the local police department should have a listing as well.
Sorry, I saw multiple hands, so I don't know the order. I'm just going to go closest right now. Okay.
It's a lady who I know. She was asking me, actually texted me today about the apartment that she was trying to get into. And she was saying that she didn't know how to get it set up to have Section 8 be a part of the apartment because the gentleman where she's at wanted to know how would they go about doing that.
So, sorry. She wants to know how the apartment building accepts Section 8 or how he would get Section, or sorry.
No, what I think it is when you call certain places, they already have like Section 8 applications or something there, I believe. And so she was asking me, did I know? And I said no.
So that goes through the Detroit Housing Commission. Okay. We can provide that number. I don't have it off the top of my head if anyone knows it. And then again, feel free to call our office and we can help them with that as well. I saw a hand over there.
Hi there. I work with Street Medicine Detroit, and sort of on topic, we're a student-based organization, and we deliver health care to both those who are rough sleepers or homeless and aren't currently in shelters. So we go out on the streets and we give health care, as well as with the Neighborhood Services Organization or the Tumani Center, where we set up mobile clinics. And we're actually starting a project currently. We're trying to refer patients that we see. We see around 450 new distinctive homeless individuals a year. And we're trying to create a referral resource of where we can refer them for any need they may have. Mm-hmm. And in the process of doing that, we haven't been able to find online or elsewhere a comprehensive list of resources people can go to. It's organized by section so that we can adequately refer people. And I think that's something that we're struggling to create ourselves, but don't really have the outside expertise to guide that. I don't know if there's a resource that currently exists to guide that, or if there's something that we could be referred to help with that.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think the city has. I have not seen one. I know Ari and Amy, you all talked about creating something similar through the youth subcommittee. I know you guys have been talking about that for quite some time. I might know the status of that if you guys want to give an update on the resource guide that you all talked about creating as well too.
So we do have a basic one-pager for youth services specific. Mm-hmm. So it is helpful somewhat in this context, but I think in terms of what you were saying and just a list of different resources, I don't believe that's something on the city's website, although we have in the past gotten the IT department to add certain things to the website, so that certainly isn't outside of the realm of possibility.
So would that be something, I mean, we've been working for the past, I'd say 3 to 4 months, creating this list and calling individual places, and it's fairly comprehensive. I think currently it's about 10 pages, and everything is organized from legal services to housing, transportation. Is that something that could be shared and proofread and then published so that, if this is a universal issue, either if you are homeless or someone is or you are an organization, it could be populated?
Yes. Yes.
I'm sure we can make great use of it.
For sure, yes.
Okay, I saw 1, 2, 3. So let's go right here.
Hi, I'm Gail Marlowe with the Motor City Minton Mission, and we do direct street outreach 7 days a week. We'll be going out tonight, and one of the things that we come in contact, I'm just echoing kind of what everybody else has said, is the lack of resources of what resources are available for people. I've been fortunate enough to actually be able to have a meeting with a couple of the people in here, so I have their phone numbers now, and so I actually will text message them now because I've tried going through some of the resources that we're supposed to use, and again, I do this 7 days a week, so I do it at all hours. So it's very frustrating. If you've worked with somebody who's homeless, you have to act very quickly to make sure that they're ready to go, and otherwise they're going to disappear. You can't find them. So if it takes us an hour just to find the resources, you can imagine how frustrating it is for somebody like me. Can you imagine somebody who's homeless who's trying to do the same thing? I mean, I can tell you a number of examples how how the system has just failed us in this, and I'm not trying to blast anybody or anything. It's just, I do think that we need to start the dialogue and actually get these things going forward, because this is a big problem. Since I have been working closer with the NSO and with the city, I feel really good about some of the people that I've seen on a daily basis. They are starting to get into housing now. They're starting to get their IDs done. Things are starting to happen a little bit, but I do think the having the resources available, and also the times, like at 9 o'clock at night, I called a service organization and they told me they were on their lunch break and it was 17 degrees outside. And they were, going to take an hour to go and get somebody, and told me, and it was because I couldn't transport them in my car. I didn't have room to. We try to facilitate these processes into these other organizations as much as possible. Street Medicine is a great team too, but they're a student organization and they only have so much resources. I don't know when they're available. CAM's closed down, and that's another issue that we have too, is I've been told, okay, take this person to such and such a place, and during a specific hour, and then we take them there and there's nobody there, or they left for the day, they left early for the day. So I don't know the accountability process, but that's something that concerns me, because I don't feel like there's a high accountability for some of these resources that are out there as well. So again, I'm one organization, and we're trying to partner with a bunch of organizations. We just, there's not really a question. I'm just kind of echoing and just kind of sharing some of the experiences that I've had recently. But anyway, that's it.
I just wanted to share some information about resources. I would recommend either calling 211 or going to their website, which I believe is mi211.org. They have an online database that you can search for all of the things that you mentioned: legal, housing, healthcare services. But it's really only as good as the organizations who share their information with 211. So if you represent an organization and your information is not in the 211 database, I would strongly recommend getting it in there so that the rest of us have access to that information as well. There's also a resource group that I belong to called the Wayne County Resource Champions, and we share resources from all over Wayne County, but there is a large representation of orgs from Detroit. But if you're interested in joining that, I'd be happy to give you more information afterward.
Thank you.
Tanisha Sanders with Detroit Action Commonwealth. I go by T. So I'm just going to uplift that I have meetings on Friday at the Capuchin Soup Kitchen, 4390 Connor, 9:45 a.m. We do try to provide IDs and birth certificates one time for a homeless person. You have to be homeless but have adequate documents that either the city take for your ordinance, the birth certificate ordinance place, or that the Secretary of State take. We do this, and we see people come in and out. But like you said, if the resource is not working, because you need an ID or birth certificate in order to get housing, you need an ID or birth certificate in order to get into most programs. you know, we still got to do what we're doing. We still got to share resources. I mean, we have to. I have a bucket with resources up to the wazoo. We take out time quarterly. Every 3 months, we call all these places and see if they're still up and running, because I don't want to give anyone any things that's not working. So, I mean, we have to help each other too, you know. So you're welcome to come out. We do have 4 different chapters. We have meetings Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it's this Meldrum, Connors, St. Leo's, and Noah. So we're working in across the city and things like that. But again, we have to come together as organizations and share, okay? So if you guys are having meetings and things like that, we need to get on some kind of generational feed or website, LinkedIn, something, and share resources. That's just it. We have to do it as organizations too. We can't just leave it up to the city too. We have to do it too. So we have to put it in our time too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I think, you know, sharing resources was a main theme from today. And so we do want to work with the street outreach team, street medicine. I know you've been out to several of our events, and we appreciate it. So if we can collaborate with you all, we can maybe review the list and see how we can also get that out to community and also post it on the city's website as well, too. Megan has a comment, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I just wanted to say exciting news at the state level. The state passed a law that people who are homeless, so if they're on streets or shelters, can get an identification card for free. So they no longer have to pay the general fee, which sometimes could be a barrier. There's more information about this available on the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness website. I think they're doing a webinar about it tomorrow, so just FYI.
Okay. All right, so we're going to end a little bit early today. I do have to go speak at a National Honor Society graduation for our 4th and 5th graders here in the city, so I do have to leave out. But thank you all for the hard work that you all do every single day for the homeless population in the city of Detroit. Feel free to call our office if you need any assistance on anything. And then we plan to have our next meeting. Our next meeting, are we going to do one next month, or is it every... If you want to just let people.
This was actually supposed to be the April meeting, so next month is, so there should be one at the end of June.
Okay,
yes.
So end of June should be our next meeting. We are open to other locations as well too, so if you guys have any suggested locations, maybe any facilities within the city that we maybe can come and host a meeting at, please feel free to let us know. All right, thank you all for coming out. Have a blessed day.